How to Create a Glitch Monologues Season 5 Chapter 6. This is the 6th episode of Season 5 of How to Create a Glitch in the Matrix Monologues. In this episode 1 we'll be discussing vaccine mandates and contextualizing contemporary changes in the law. To start off, we saw in a previous episode that for the most part we exist in a reality which is consensual. This means that our experience, even in a group, is shaped by our self-knowledge of our identity and our consent to the exchange. In reality, however, this consensual nature of the exchange is an artifact of a particular worldview, an ideological edifice which rests upon individuals having certain inalienable rights. The interface of the law, upon which we interact with this reality, is the product of a hierarchical system, the result of archetypes given preferential capacities to enact standards of behavior. More importantly, as set out in a previous podcast, the capacity to compel mirroring in others is what produces unitary phenomenon, but it is in our postural releases that we grant our consent to the lawmaker, and the unidirectional power imbalance represented by the hierarchy. Effectively, what I am saying is the law-driven interfaces are hierarchical by their very nature, which means that the very organization of our social exchanges would have to be re-engineered to give precedence to our equality. However, the impact of this is the loss of consent to the exchange. Only in eliminating consent is it possible to transition to a truly egalitarian system. This means that the system which results will be non-consensual. In other words, the transition from consensual reality to non-consensual reality is the only pathway towards true equality. But there are troubling consequences. First of all, a non-consensual reality is dualistic, whereas a consensual reality can be unitary and relies upon the creation of two groups, a closed grouping and a out-grouping. Next, the non-consensual reality must be a closed social system, no migration. Also, the organization of the closed non-consensual reality is one of compulsion, one of no inhibition, one of no outs. The content and limits of experience are thus communally determined and imposed. So how do vaccine mandates play into the analysis? Currently, government is contemplating coercive measures to compel vaccination. The justification behind this trend is provided by the assertion of abstract and often empirically questionable paradigms of sickness between individual citizens and their understanding of their bodies. These paradigms are put forward under the guise of medical governmental authority. What this tells us is that the edifice of inalienable rights which we took for granted, which enabled the consensual reality, may be crumbling before our very eyes. In effect, by trusting the paradigms of sickness, we are stepping into a non-consensual reality, one with the qualities set out above, namely, one in which there is no inhibition, where choosing not to act according to the common conception of the good represents a form of sickness. In effect, we have been conscripted to choose between equality and freedom, between the common good and freedom. That's the end of the podcast for today. If you enjoyed it, please comment, like and subscribe.